Welcome to Anthodish, the show about food, culture, and identity. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Dugnan. For anyone that grew up without a strong sense of connection to cooking or eating cultural foods, it can be a little daunting to get into the kitchen and make your own relationship with food. But for today's guest, Jamie Tracey, that lack of relationship was enough incentive to try an honest approach to building something that would last. Jamie is a self-taught creator and Canadian cook that created Anti-Chef, a culinary experiment that plays out in real time in his YouTube series. It captures the good, bad, chaos, and triumph that comes with learning and loving to cook. With more than 500,000 subscribers, Anti-Chef follows Jamie as he dives headfirst into the hilarious, messy, and human side of trying something new. From Julia Child's most intimidating recipes to Michelin-level masterpieces and celebrity cage matches, Jamie takes his audience along for the ride, mistakes, meltdowns, and all. In today's conversation, Jamie discusses what food disconnects can look like, how he leveraged his film background and lack of cooking skills to create his heartfelt and entertaining YouTube series, Canadian food culture and its impact on shaping how he thought about food and eating in the 90s, the process of being a self-taught cook and the impact that it has when you have an audience watching your highs and lows, and the lessons he's learned from cooking Julia Child's recipes for the show. Here's my conversation with Jamie. All right, welcome to the show, Jamie. How are you doing today?
Hello, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for coming on. I'm excited to chat with you. So do you mind sharing a bit of a snapshot about who you are, where you're coming in from today, and the type of work that you do?
Sure. My name's Jamie Tracey, known on the internet as Anti-Chef, primarily cooking YouTuber, but you can find me all over the place. Anti-Chef, Fool in the Kitchen. You know, that's you could Google that. I'd probably pop up as well. And I'm here in Toronto in my basement studio headquarters.
Awesome. Nice. I'm excited. I always get pumped to chat with people in Toronto because I feel like there's such a special food scene in Toronto in particular, and it doesn't always get the same attention or glory. So yeah.
Yes, it doesn't. When you compare it to the bigger cities like New York or Chicago or something like that, it always doesn't get mentioned in the same kind of conversations.
Yeah. And yet you can find any food from any culture and it's easily accessible as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm curious, your story really stuck out to me because I also grew up with a pretty big disconnection to food and had to teach myself how to cook. I'm not good in any, I'm better now, but you know how it goes. So can you talk a bit about your upbringing and some of the foods or ingredients that you think speak to that experience of growing up for you?
Right. Yeah. I mean, food it was a way for me to, I would enjoy the pizzas and the hamburgers of the world. I grew up in the suburbs outside of Toronto. So in the 90s, pork chops for dinner with cream of mushroom soup, Campbell's, you pour that on top, spaghetti and meatballs. That was as far as I went. After school, I could have a pizza pop or a Pop-Tart or something, but that's really as far as I went. And when someone would cook for me, I didn't ask a whole lot of questions. And my mom did try a lot to put dishes on the dinner table that weren't your typical, the things that I would get excited about, dad's steak or a pizza or something like that. But when mom would flip open a page of Canadian Living magazine and flip through the recipes in a book like that and try something a little outside of my comfort zone, it was not met with applause. She was always experimental and you know what? It's just my palate wasn't there. Specifically, there was something called a peanut butter casserole she made once. And all I remember about it was that there was a peanut butter in a savory dish and it rubbed me the wrong way then. And still to this day, I think about this peanut butter casserole, but she was trying things that now I can see where she was going with it. So you know what? Maybe I need to make that with her again or something like that just to see maybe it is better than I once thought it was. But yeah, that's kind of where I started. And there wasn't any knowledge besides the basics.
Yeah. And it's something that I'm always really interested in because I speak with a lot of people who have very rich upbringings and backgrounds in cooking and warm memories of connecting with their grandparents over cooking and learning their way around the kitchen. And I was very much a shake and bake chicken kind of gal, you know?
Shake and bake, and I helped.
Exactly. Yeah. So I wonder too sometimes because when we think about the idea of Canadian food, it's usually posed as a joke. There's poutine or Nanaimo bars, but there's not really a strong sense of Canadian food. So I'm curious to get your perspective on that. Like, do you think that has kind of shaped those earlier experiences with food for you?
I think so. I think even as a kid, I knew like butter tarts, Nanaimo
Yeah.
bars, poutine on the East Coast. You could find lobsters on the West Coast, salmon. And that's kind of the bubble that I was living in. And I do think I mean, M&M Meats. Do you remember
Yeah.
M&M Meats?
Yeah.
Canadian, what is that, a butcher shop or something? No, it's
Guess so. But it's like boxed, like it's,
yeah, anyway, they would have Nanaimo bars there. And I knew specifically that slab of Nanaimo bars was a Canadian specific thing. And it's funny because now that I make the show, I start getting into the nuances and understanding it's a little more specific than just saying broadly, this is a Canadian thing. Nanaimo bars, of course, from the West Coast, from Nanaimo. But during the pandemic, I started a series called Cooking Around the World. And I was cooking a dish from every country in the world in alphabetical order. And
cool.
I got to B. I finished B and then I stopped. I did make Canada's because being from Canada, I was like, okay, I'm going to start the series off making poutine from Canada. And this was early in my YouTube days. So that's the broad brush I painted it as. It's just a Canadian dish. It was poutine. And I released this video and no mention of anything else, just Canadian poutine. And then in the comments, I was just humbled. Everyone was like, dude, you made a whole video about this and not once did you mention the province of Quebec or Quebecois dish or anything like that. And it really opened my eyes to be not just for Canada, but just globally. Like there is just so much going on with every little dish and ingredient and all the nuances. And if you could say, painting something as broadly as poutine as just solely a Canadian dish, and when it's so much more than that. So that was a learning experience for me. It really opened my eyes to Canadian cuisine, that there was more to it than I thought. And I was wrong in that case, but YouTube comments can ground you.
Very quickly.
Yes.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I think that's one of those pieces where as I learn more, I get more interested in looking at the regionalities of Canadian food. But I think one of those things where those sorts of conversations weren't as nuanced growing up in terms of like looking at the regionalities of Canadian food. And I think it's more recently that we're all kind of starting to build a different appreciation too, right?
And I think that's just in the food landscape entirely. Like, I mean, I don't know how prior to the internet did people really get up in arms about the layers in a Nanaimo bar and like ratios between the crust, the filling, and the chocolate on top. But nowadays, you could find a New York Times article about how it matters. Like, it does matter about the ratios of that kind of thing. So I do think the internet started all these conversations, a lot of them important, some of them not. And it did broaden this kind of discussion when it comes to cuisine.
Totally, yeah. In terms of starting Anti-Chef and that journey on the internet as well, because I feel like the relationship between your cooking and internet is like very uniquely intertwined. Can you speak a bit to like how you started to get that idea for it taking shape as a show?
So I come from a filmmaking background, first of all. So I was already making videos on my own, and that was mainly the focus for my 20s, was being a filmmaker. And I didn't think much about food, that's for sure. And then my now wife, Christy, entered the picture with food on the brain. She knew the restaurant scene in Toronto. She could cook for herself without a recipe. She understood ingredients. She just added a little culture to my life.
Nice.
And when she would watch me in the kitchen, she would get a hoot out of it because she was like, what is going on with this person? And I did grow up, my high school job was working at Swiss Chalet. I was a rotisserie chicken cook, so I had that background going for me. But besides that, nothing. So when we first were getting to know each other, I would try to cook for her occasionally, and it turned into like a weekly theme. It was called like Jamie Cooks Thursdays. So I would cook a recipe every Thursday for her, and she would watch this. And I remember on like the second week, I tried to make a fried rice dish, and it was a recipe I was following, and there was hoisin sauce that I needed to pour into this dish. And I thought you would just pour the whole jar into it, but I think you just needed a tablespoon. And I served it to her, and she's like, yeah, it's a bit sweet. It's a little hoisin-y. And we forever call that Hoisingate. But yeah, so she kind of opened the doors to the cooking scene for me and kind of pushed me a little bit because I was wanting to make videos on as a frequent basis as possible. And then I was running out of ideas, and all my friends in filmmaking were losing. I mean, I guess it's kind of harder just to corral people when you get older to do
Okay.
your own little projects. So I needed something to film, and she was like, you know what, it's really funny when you cook. So why don't you try filming yourself? And that's where that started. That got me into cooking. That got me into filming myself. And through the act of doing that, I just became more and more interested in
Mm.
cooking. But it did start from no knowledge. The first episode, I don't know what wilting spinach is.
I
I
watched
didn't
that
know there
one.
was. Yeah. So I'm kind of fixated on figuring out what that means. I was like flipping through cookbooks. I guess I could have just Googled it, but I didn't. I was just sitting in it. And at the same time, I didn't know what white pepper was. The first
Mm.
episode, I was like, what is this mysterious ingredient? I didn't know there was such a thing as the elusive white pepper. Um, and yeah, so that's kind of where the food, that everything changed for me.
Mm. Yeah, it's such a great place to explore too, and I really appreciate like throughout the evolution of the videos that you've shared, there's such an honesty in your approach, which you don't really see a lot in cooking. Like there tends to be a focus on like the polished and the perfectionism. And I'm curious, in terms of like using YouTube as a medium, can you talk a bit about, how you started to shape your YouTube persona and the storytelling approaches? Like was that right from the get-go very clear to you, or did it shift through time?
So I'm always playing a game with that. It did start from a place of I had the filmmaking side of things down. I
Yeah.
had the one up on people who wanted to get into the YouTube cooking world scene. I had a one up in the way that I could edit and add music and create it like a story out of something,
Yeah.
because I could make my own short films and stuff like that. So I had that going for me. But on the other hand, I didn't know how to cook. So it was like a level playing field between me and my other peers. I think through making the show, and building an audience, I've been throughout time. I started from a place of honesty. I didn't know how to cook, and I was releasing it to the world, but no one was really watching. And at one point in time, after like maybe episode 30, I started to transition into, well, I kind of got to be like everyone else to get
Mm.
people to watch me, because the internet is everything is finely tuned and everything is beautiful, and all the food needs to look the part, and it needs to be something desirable and Food Network and Martha Stewart looking. And I remember I tried for a couple episodes to be someone that I wasn't, and go like, oh, this is how I'm going to show you how to make specifically like a Belgian waffle. And I had this Belgian waffle recipe, and I was like, you got to do it like this, and you get perfect Belgian waffles every time. And there was like a period of time there where I was trying to do something, but the more that I would film myself, the more the mistakes kind of snuck through, and the
Mm.
audience would catch them, and then they would comment and give me feedback of like, oh my, like I really liked when you showed me that, or I could relate to that problem that you were having. And the more feedback I got from that, it gave me permission to just kind of open up the doors a little more and be like,
Mm.
oh, people do want to see these mistakes that I'm making. I don't need to hide them. I can embrace them. And throughout time, I've just been able to sit on my mistakes longer and really not just show the mistakes, but show where my brain is going, how I can get out of these mistakes, or do I ever get out of them? Is there a way to hack it? And the more that I make these videos, the more permission the audience kind of gives me. It's kind of now
Yeah.
we have this relationship where I'm able to show who I am, and they accept me. And with that, I can kind of open up the doors even more. And then they relate to it, and then they're like, hey, I've been through that. My most viral moment on the internet was discovering what vanilla seeds were. And I did it live in the moment, because everything is live on the moment. Like I'm making these recipes for the very first time on my show. So every episode I don't know how it's going to end. I only know how it's going to start.
Right.
So everyone is learning with me. I'm learning in the moment. And for the specific vanilla seed debacle, I had known what vanilla extract was, but with a vanilla seed, yeah, I had to split. It was a big purchase for me. It was expensive. I split it open, and I was kind of reading the recipe as I was going along. I didn't really prepare for the recipe, so I split open this vanilla bean, and I was looking for the seeds, and I couldn't find the seeds. Unbeknownst to me, they were on my fingers. They were just little tiny
Oh
seeds.
no.
I was expecting like chili pepper seeds, something substance there. So I couldn't find them. So I was like, oh, I think I just need the pod. So I wiped all the seeds off the pod, added it into the pot, and then I reread the recipe and it said, add the vanilla seeds into the pot. And I was like, oh, the seeds. I threw in the bean.
Oh,
The
no.
seeds were all in the garbage already and on the towel that I just wiped them off. And it was just the most boneheaded thing that you could ever see from a cooking YouTuber on the internet. But I showed it to people, and some people were baffled by it, but a lot of people can understand kind of where I'm coming from. But the more that people are accepting of that, the more I'll show them.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, it reminds me of there was like a time, I probably would have been like 18, 19. A friend of mine had made this like really fancy dinner with her mom and she was presenting it to us and there were bay leaves in there and I'd never come across them before. And so I just ate the full dried bay leaf. And it's one of those things where it's such a normal piece of a human experience, but especially when it comes to like food media and that need to polish, there's not always that space to like explore those real time,
Bay leaves are a recurring gag on my show because
Oh yeah.
it started from a place of following specifically maybe like a French recipe and it calling for 2 bay leaves, and I would add them in just because I had to, and not ever being able to know what they did. And then over time, I was like, you know what? I'm going to make myself a bay leaf tea just to discover what this flavor is. So I did. I steeped like 10 bay leaves into a mug and tasted it. I was like, oh, it does have a bit of a flavor. So interesting. It's one of those ingredients that kind of just ties the dish together. But for the longest time, didn't know what it did. And then now I just, I'll joke around with my audience. If it calls for 2 bay leaves, I'll add in 5. Will you notice? Probably not. I
Yeah.
don't.
Fair. Yeah. And in terms of, like learning real time on the camera over the years, can you talk a little bit about that experience and like some of the biggest challenges? Because I find what's interesting is like you're growing with your audience. Like you're not doing a bit or a shtick to like keep up this, idea that you don't know what you're doing. Obviously, you've created this entire world from it. So yeah, so can you talk a bit about like some of the challenges in terms of growing and learning on the camera?
Yeah, I mean, the more my show goes along, the longer the videos get.
Mm,
And that's because I'm kind of going the opposite way of where the internet wants to go, which is just shorter
yeah.
and briefer, and everything is the best.
Yeah.
Everything is polished. Everything is the most insane thing you've ever seen, or the easiest 3 ingredient recipe, and everyone's going one way. And I'm really don't want to go that direction. I like to just hang out and be myself, follow the recipe, get into the weeds of a single recipe. So if I'm going to make a recipe, I'm not just going to breeze through it. I'm going to understand each component of it and sit in it. I find that the direction of where everyone's going with TikTok, virality, and all that jazz. And I just keep trying to go another place where I'm like, I don't want it to go there.
Yeah.
'Cause I'll watch a TikTok and it's like how to make pesto. And then it's just people throwing ingredients together. I was like, wait, what was that ingredient that you added there? And it's useful for some people and it's entertainment. But yeah, mine specifically, I like just hanging out, having a good time, and trying to tell a story out of what I'm doing. Because a lot of the time there's a lot of failure. And okay, if there's going to be failure, then I have to figure out, am I going to get myself out of this? If I messed up, can I hack it? Can I figure it out? If not, then I'm going to tell a story about how I failed. And because that's just as, those happen just as often in the kitchen as the successes, at least for me.
Yeah, 100%.
If it fails, then okay, I'll just have a good time trying to make people laugh.
Awesome. Yeah, it reminds me, I've been thinking a lot about recipe development in cookbooks. And I know that's something like you're looking at a lot of older cookbooks and a variety of them versus like the TikTok meals where I've made so many in the past few months where it looks great on TikTok. And then you're like, oh, that'll be great to feed my family. And it's like incomplete or hard pasta or something that just like doesn't quite turn out.
Yeah.
So I'm curious in terms of like even the cookbooks that you source, like where do you look to get some of those recipes and to develop those into your own?
Yeah, I mean, it started from the Queen, Julia Child. That's where
Yeah.
everything kind of started to click for me in the YouTube world. Of course, I can't go any further without mentioning Julia Child and how I have a series on my YouTube channel called Jamie and Julia, which sounds familiar. Yes, because I got the idea from Julie and Julia, the book and the movie, and the woman Julie Powell. And she created that kind of challenge for herself of cooking every recipe out of Mastering the Art of French Cooking, Volume 1. And I thought that would be a good idea for a YouTube show, so I started doing that. So I bought the book and I dove headfirst into that, and that's kind of where my YouTube success kind of really started to take shape. And from there, I have a fascination with books. Not all cookbooks, unique ones, older ones, the classics, why they're classic, French cooking, vintage ones, novelty ones. And so I like to understand the recipes. For Mastering the Art of French Cooking, it's taken a lot of years of me flipping through these pages and making nearly, I think, 150 of her recipes and I still don't understand everything that she's saying. And it comes from like the phrasing, and the French cooking has techniques that you need to understand first before you can even finish a dish. And there's like how to make a roux or a bechamel or a Mornay sauce. You got to understand those basics before you can understand the rest of a recipe in her cookbook. Or you got to flip to another part of a master recipe in order to make the variation. And she still confuses me with those kinds of things. So there was confusion even in those older cookbooks. I know you said that TikTok has the confusion.
Different types.
Still in those older cookbooks, but that's where my interest is, in following the recipes on the page. And I have a giant cookbook collection, and it keeps building. And I'll go into, there's no book that I'm scared of. I'll go in there and I'll make, whether it's a Michelin star dish, I'll give it a try and see where it takes me, or I'll just make the most comforting French stew. I learn through just getting my hands dirty and doing them. So yeah, like I said, I started from a place of nothing. I've been doing this for nearly 8 years now or so, and I now can understand the basics. Sorry, more than it. Now I can understand. Now I can flipping through Michelin star recipes, and I can get to the finish line, and I'm like, hey, I did that.
So I watched Julie and Julia when it came out, and I've seen your series where you're also exploring the cooking process. And as you said, like the flipping between the pages and the complexity of even just the structure of the book is interesting, because then I also was reading this biography of the editor of Julia Child. They had this whole process where they were sending the recipes back and forth to each other through mail and testing it out across America. So it always strikes me, because it seems like it, obviously was this really rigorous process, but as you said, there's still like a lot of barriers to accessing it, even just in terms of, having to flip between places to get parts of the recipe to build the whole. When you think about like the Julie and Julia element of it, there's obviously like the feminine component. So I'm curious if you can speak a bit to like the gendered elements of your experience working with that. Has that shaped your experience learning in the kitchen at all?
It's so interesting, because there is such a gender component to the Julia Child recipes that keeps popping up in her books. I mean, it's and her TV show, where she would mention something. I know, like, I can call it it was like a kitchen sink lasagna recipe that Julia Child has. And it's confusing if you just looked at it, because you're like, what is this thing that she has made? It's going to offend a lot of Italians.
Yeah, fair.
But it comes from a place of, and she mentions this on her French Chef old TV show, where it was like, what do you make when your husband's coming home with company from work, kind of like the Mad Men Don Draper type. He's coming home from work. You got to make something. What are you going to do? Well, go into your fridge, find all these leftover ingredients, throw them into a dish, and it's a lasagna. And it had like leftover chicken and ricotta cheese or cottage cheese. It was up to you, but it was just like the kitchen sink kind of lasagna. And it was just the idea of the woman being at home and having to cook for the man that was going to burst through the doors with company. She also has recipes called like a chicken recipe that can be made in 30 minutes, or a steak dinner in 30 minutes. And it's a whole feast. And it's designed for like 6 people that are about to come through the door after work. So there is that gendered element in there that is probably a little dated.
Yeah, fair.
But the amazing thing about Julia Child recipes, or just French cooking in general, and this is just something I've discovered recently, is once you get to know the basics of like I said, like a bechamel sauce, which is which is, let's see here. You make a roux, equal parts butter and flour, then you add in the milk, you bring that to a boil, and now you got a bechamel. Once you figure out something like that, you can start adding it into your own cooking, which I most recently just did. I have a video I just released with my own recipe, which is called Franken mac and cheese. And it was just a mac and cheese with a bechamel base. And what I had done is I had followed along to 3 chef mac and cheese recipes on a separate video. And I discovered that I liked components of all 3 of these recipes. So what I did is created like a super mac and cheese of all the things that I liked out of those recipes. Cool. And I combined it into one. But it was like creating a recipe from the ground up. And that was only possible through understanding like how Julia Child taught me how to make these sauces, or the foundation of French cooking specifically, which is just so prevalent in so much other cooking.
Cool. And it's also like a really cool place to be at as a cook when you have muscle memory almost, where you can apply them.
Yeah. And then you can start like going into the pantry and like, oh, what am I going to make? Yeah. I know I have the milk. I know I have the butter. Oh, okay, there's your base, and then where do you go from there? And it's like almost like I've developed this the superpower that so many people had, that now I'm starting to come up with on my own, where I can go into the kitchen and be like, oh, well, I'm going to make this today because I know I have these ingredients and I can make it work this way. And it doesn't always, like I tried to do it again most recently the other day with a variation of my super mac and cheese. I was going to tweak a couple things, and then I was like, okay, well, I screwed it up entirely.
Oh, that's awesome. And in terms of, I know you're a parent now, and I'm curious like how you kind of see your vision for the kitchen in the future with that, because I find like for me, once I had kids, I cared a bit more about, sharing, because I didn't grow up learning how to cook or like having those memories. So is that something that you see shifting in your own family?
Oh, 100%. Yes, I am a new father to a son, and I don't ever want him to be as inept as I was.
I feel the same.
I mean, when I was 20, I worked at Swiss Chalet as a rotisserie chicken cook, but at the same time, I'd come home from work in my 20s and I would try to cook a chicken breast on my George Foreman knockoff grill. All I knew was that I had to cook it all the way through till it was white. So it didn't matter if it was overcooked or not. It was just cooked. That was safety first. Or like at some point I was a bad vegetarian, and I was bouncing between being a vegetarian and a meat eater. But at one point during my vegetarian days, I would come home from work after stopping at the grocery store to pick up veggie burgers or prepackaged veggie hot dogs, the Yeeves. I threw them in the microwaves for like 2 minutes, and then I would serve that with the side of like lettuce, like with my idea of salad. And that would be my 20s dinner. I don't want to be that. I don't want my son to ever be that inept. Showing him how it works. Recently, I've had him in my arms while I've been cooking. Over the holidays, I made like a beef bourguignon. I had him specifically in my hand, and I was like stirring the beef, and he was watching, and he kept trying to grab the spatula. But I want that to continue throughout the course of his young life. And yeah, I think cooking will forever be a part of our household now.
That's cool. Yeah. That's wonderful. I find, so my daughter, I also like introduced her as I was learning how to cook, and she's 10 now. And a couple months ago we were ordering pizza, and I was thinking like, oh, Little Caesars or something, like it's busy, we're tired. She was like, I don't think so. Can we get like the nice pizza from like the expensive place? And I was like, what child did I raise? That's like the antithesis of me, but it's such a cool thing. Yeah, unintentionally. But it's one of those things, right, where it definitely shifts how you think about your family too. So yeah.
No, but I'm with you too. Like if he wants the nice pizza, like the fancy gourmet Neapolitan pizza, or if he wants Domino's, I'm cool with Domino's too. Yep. It's just got a special place in my heart.
Always, yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jamie. I really appreciated getting to chat with you and learn more about Anti-Chef and the story behind it. Can you share where people can find you online if they want to follow along?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can find Anti-Chef all over the internet. YouTube is my baby, but all over the socials, Anti-Chef or antichef.com as the hub. Yes.
Sweet. Thank you so much, Jamie. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
That was Jamie Tracey. I've linked his YouTube channel and his social media in the show notes below. You can also find all this at our website at anthodish.com under episodes. Thanks so much for listening to Anthodish Podcast. Subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you like Anthodish, please give us a rating on Apple Podcasts to help get the word out. For more Anthodish, you can sign up for my newsletter at sarahduignan.substack.com or find me on TikTok, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, Facebook, pretty much anywhere at Anthodish Podcast. I always love hearing from you and what you're learning about food. Music production was done by Lucas Wojcicki at lucasound.com. Anthodish is produced in partnership with the American Anthropological Association. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week.